Well, we're joined yet again by our friend, Professor Guy McPherson. Hello, Guy. Are you with us?
Yes, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it every single time.
It's fantastic to have you back on.
Well, where do we start? Do you want a quick update first?
Yeah, okay.
So last time we spoke, we had, was it 36 self-reinforcing feedback loops have been discovered. Have there been any more since July?
Oh my goodness, those were the days, weren't they? Only 3 dozen self-reinforcing feedback loops. Let's see, since then, well, looks like we're up to 46.
Wow. That's just in 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The times they are changing.
Oh, definitely.
And there have been a couple of really interesting developments. One, the International Energy Agency came out with a report, and this was in May, but I wasn't aware of it until about a month ago.
Okay.
And in their report, they forecast that business as usual takes us to up to 6 degrees C temperature rise by 2050.
We can't do that. We can't
do
that. No.
So that's a big number. There's no way humans survive that rise in temperature that quickly. And so Paul Beckwith, relatively recently, it was in late November, in fact, put out a video. And this is the guy from the University of Ottawa who specializes in methane coming out of the Arctic Ocean. Mm-hmm. And he predicts that Earth will experience somewhere between a 5 and a 16 C temperature rise within a decade or two. And he says, 5 or 6 C within a couple of decades, 2034, that isn't that much difference from the International Energy Agency's 6 C by 2050 forecast.
It's just kind of backing that evidence up, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Right, and you have to bear in mind that the IEA is not taking into account methane.
No.
And so that's Beckwith's specialty is Arctic Ocean methane. So he sort of comes out and says it's not that big a deal. It's only 16 years earlier than they say business as usual takes us, and we're just adding in methane. So people shouldn't get too excited about this.
But we're seeing the rise in temperatures all around the world. We've just had Australia have had the hottest year on record for a long time. I think it's their third hottest year they've ever had on record.
Well,
Britain last year as well.
The Japanese Meteorological Organization just reported yesterday, I believe, that the global temperature was the hottest ever on record, and I suspect the other national organizations will come on board relatively soon with the same sort of finding.
Yeah, but then it's still not talking about the consequences of that, are they? They're arguing about the temperature, but they're not talking about, well, what does that produce? What's that going to do to our climate? What's that going to do to our environment?
Right. They don't point out that we've never had humans at more than 3.22 degrees Celsius above baseline. And so when they throw around terms like 5 and 6 degrees centigrade in a short period of time, they really don't consider that the habitat for humans, meaning mostly our food supply, isn't going to last through that.
No.
I see no way with the acidification currently going on in the ocean that we'll have a significant number of phytoplankton at 3 or 4, much less 6 degrees centigrade above baseline.
And they're the little organisms that live in the sea that are literally microscopic, but they're the building blocks, aren't they, of the sea?
That's right. They're the base of the marine food web, so they really account for about half of the food humans eat.
Quite literally, yeah.
Yeah, and the other half, of course, is land plants, and the temperature swings, the temperature variations, and the temperature extremes associated with 0.85 C above baseline, which is where we're at now, are already causing serious havoc in terms of land plants. We can really only imagine what 3 and 4 C above baseline are going to look like with respect to those temperature swings. Beckwith says that we could the abnormal jet stream we're seeing now could be up to 30 times worse. He says 10, 20, 30, 40 times worse than it is right now.
Yeah, I know that today, the British press today were talking about the jet stream that's coming in to hit us this week, at the end of this week, from Wednesday onwards. And again, they're using the terms, unnatural, freak weather kind of conditions. We're definitely seeing these weather patterns happening around the world, and it's been horrendous for some people, especially in the places like in Malaysia. They got absolutely flooded out. And over winter we'll see much more of the same, no doubt.
Right.
And we're seeing that globally. Indeed.
You can't really deny that it's going on anymore. I mean, even the hardcore deniers are kind of just shutting up now. But still, not enough's being done, is it?
It's pretty interesting. I actually have a bigger issue with the deniers of abrupt climate change than with the deniers of climate change in general, or anthropogenic climate change. It seems like the people who deny abrupt climate change are more vociferous, more recalcitrant, more dug in than even the people who deny anthropogenic climate change.
Right. Yeah. As in the viewpoints, they're more set in their ways, kind of thing.
And I actually just did an analysis recently, and it terrifies me, so I figured I better share it with you.
Please do. You know we're like the truth here. We can handle the truth.
So we know the Arctic ice is going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, one of these Septembers, and the Parliament there in the UK a few years ago predicted that it would be gone by September 2015. And when that happens, I see no way that that 50 gigaton burp of methane that Natalia Shukova predicts is highly likely at any time. I see no way for that to stay beneath the Arctic Ocean. And so when that happens, that 50 gigaton burst is going to produce a 1.3 C temperature rise around that'll be the global average within a year. It takes about a year for methane to be fully circulated in the atmosphere. And what that means is we're at 2.15 C above baseline, which is the end of civilization. And it's fascinating to me that climate scientists used to talk about 2C being the end of civilization. And then a few years ago, when it became obvious that 2C was locked in, they started saying, oh yeah, 2-3 is going to be a problem, but 4C is the end of civilization.
Okay.
They drag it out, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, the little shifting baseline phenomenon.
Do you think there's a possibility that they don't want to discuss it and bring it out into the mainstream because they don't want to cause a panic? Do you think maybe that's why they're doing it?
Absolutely. They don't want to cause a panic on two fronts. They don't want to cause a panic among the people, and they don't want to cause a panic in their own paycheck.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
or in their own courses they're allowed to teach, or in their own daily lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that we get that 50 gigaton burp of methane coming out of the Arctic Ocean and consequent 1.3 C temperature rise. Then we have the cessation of civilization, and that means another 1.4 C or so temperature rise because the sulfates aren't being added to the atmosphere anymore. And so that takes us to 3.55 C. Well, the highest temperature above baseline that we've had humans was 3.22. So we could experience all of the above in a matter of a couple of years, and that's more than 3/4 of that temperature rise would occur in less than 2 years. Wow. That sounds problematic to me.
Oh, definitely.
But I don't see anybody else talking about it.
No.
Is this the Blue Ocean event that I heard them talking about in Lima?
Yes, absolutely.
Could you explain that?
I can't.
So the
We'll ask the scientists, shall we?
You just seem to be knowledgeable about it, that's all.
I watched a video.
Okay.
So over to you guys.
What we've had in the Arctic for the entirety of the human experience is an ocean that is covered with ice, at least partially covered with ice, for the entire human experience. And we see less ice, and we've seen a profound decrease in ice, especially since the 1970s in the Arctic Ocean, and the ice reaches a minimum, an annual minimum, every September. At some point, and I suspect it'll occur in the not too distant future, at some point the ice is going to be all gone in September. That's a blue ocean event. So instead of having the white ice reflecting insulation back into space, we have that blue ocean absorbing that solar radiation.
And of course that
and heating up even faster.
Right.
I actually did this experiment when I was speaking on a college campus a month or two ago. When I started my presentation, I had a glass of ice water, and it was about half ice and half water. And I spoke for I was there. I spoke for about 40 minutes or so, and then there was a bunch of Q&A. And for the first hour and a half, there was still a little bit of ice in there. And what that means is that the temperature of that water was 0 degrees centigrade. But as soon as the last little bit of ice went away, after it had been 0 degrees centigrade for an hour and a half or so, as soon as that last little bit of ice went away, the water heated up to room temperature in a matter of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
A little bit of ice goes a really long way in the Arctic and in the Martini. Either way, a little bit of ice is a big deal. So getting rid of all that ice is a really big deal.
One of our mutual friends, Kevin Hester, shared a video just recently which showed the last 15 years of the Arctic and how it was a time-lapse video in 27 seconds of the last 15 years, and it just showed how dramatically it has reduced, as you say, in the September when it's at its thinnest.
Yeah, it really is pretty profound. If you take the even broader view, there's Arctic ice records going back thousands of years, and you look at it up until the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and it's a long time scale, so it's all stretched out, and then the Industrial Revolution begins just a couple hundred years ago, and it just absolutely falls off the shelf, it just falls off a table. It's just a downward drop in a very rapid period of time. And then if you look up close at the same phenomenon since the 1970s, it's the same story. It's really accelerated within the last couple of human generations.
It's when you overlay that information with other information, like the bell curve of
peak oil.
If you imagine that in reverse.
Population as well.
Yeah.
Right.
You look at the population spike. You can see with the population spike, and it'll sit quite nicely in there with industrial civilization.
And I'm sure that if you overlay the data that you just talked about, it will show a similar pattern. It's when you overlay all of the data that you get the big picture, isn't it? Basically.
Yes, that's right. I think it was early 2000s, Ed Ayers wrote a book called God's Last Offer. And Holmes Rolston III wrote a review of it in the Journal of Conservation Biology called Four Spikes Last Chance. And I'm doing this from memory, and it's about 15 years ago. But in the review, Rolston points out that the book focuses on these four spikes. The four spikes being carbon dioxide in the atmosphere spiking up, going exponential, the extinction rate, one other one that I don't remember, and the human population that underlies the three previous ones. And the inability to understand the exponential function is probably one of the most marked characteristics of our species. And so occasionally we have somebody come along, write a book about it, and explains it in clear language that it means utter disaster. But we just don't integrate that very well, so we sort of turn away from it, and that's what takes us right here to where we are.
That's right.
Is,
burying their heads in the sun.
Yeah, thinking that the near future is going to be just like the recent past, because that's always been the case for our entire lives.
That's right. Yeah.
There are no consequences to our actions.
There was actually a British philosopher, Alan Watts. We've played some bits and pieces on our show of him, and he's absolutely fantastic. And some of the things that he talks about, he was so on the ball then about what's going on today. It's quite astounding. And to hear him talking, you'd think that he's alive today and he gave the speech yesterday. You know, it's that kind of wow. You know, he sat there blown away from it. But that was also kind of the things that he was saying, was that we have this way of burying our heads in the sand and just assuming that the future is going to be the same down the road than it is now. And we're doing that to our own detriment, because we just constantly think that this paradigm, this financial paradigm, this global paradigm is going to constantly go on and on and on, and everything's going to be fine, and we're going to constantly grow.
Right.
But the science then comes back and says, well, hang on a minute, you can. There's no such thing as infinite growth on a planet with a climate that's deteriorating the way it is. But they still kind of ignore it. You know, oh, don't worry about that. Go shopping. Black Friday. Have a Christmas holiday. We see that in the media all the time, and it gets really frustrating when you look at it and you're thinking, but there's so many people that could be helped if they were using the media properly,
to
rather
educate
than
us.
pushing out their own agendas and their own
Well, that's right. And you mentioned the British philosopher, and we can go back. You don't have to go back very far in time to find 3 amazing science fiction writers who, just reporting on the trends of the day, have managed to describe 50, 60, 70 years in advance exactly where we are. And here I'm thinking about Ray Bradbury and George Orwell and Aldous Huxley.
Yeah. Nodding all the way to it. Yeah. But
Right,
that's how they did it, wasn't it? They took what they saw around them in the world today and projected that into the future.
That's exactly right. And each of them, I read interviews of them late in their lives, and each of them said, I'm just describing what's happening right now. I'm not even projecting forward. So, from their perspective, what they were writing was actually happening right now, and most people were just failing to see it. And I can relate to that. That really resonates with me, considering what I write about in terms of abrupt climate change. It's just what I see right now, and a lot of other people can't see it, but it won't be long.
It won't be. I mean, there's a conference going on today in Oxford about sustainability within the farming, and they're talking there about the fact that the nutrients are depleting from the soil. The temperature is having an effect, the precipitation is having an effect, the invariable climate is having a massive impact. So they are starting to talk about it in other areas, but they're all looking at it so blinkered. They're not looking at it as a broader picture and applying all of it to the small bit that they're focusing on. They're just taking the little cherries and...
But again, they're just focusing on what interests them, what they're after.
What impacts
how
their
it suits
profits.
them. Yeah, and how it impacts them, of course. Rather than
Well,
how it
yes.
impacts the civilization, as it were.
Right. We're all narcissists.
Yeah, we are.
Capitalists are just better narcissists than some of the rest of us.
So how do we change that? How do we get people to care?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to it. I've been saying for a year or so now, when greed is your only god, sociopaths assume control. And we are so enamored with money as a concept and as something we really value, and so that's what takes us here. I mean, my friend Michael Rupert probably said 10,000 times, until you change the way money works, you change nothing at all. And we haven't changed the way money works, and so we have sociopaths in charge. And oddly enough, we view them as successful. We all want to be them because they have all the money.
That's the irony, isn't it?
It is. So we say we want a better world, but how we want that is we want to have all the money so that we can buy a better world.
Without actually thinking about anybody else. Yeah.
Right, yeah. And that's how we get to where we're at, it seems to me.
We are selfish, aren't we?
See, I'm kind of, me and Ali, of course, have had this discussion many times on the show as well, and I'm very much of the opinion that people have to be shaken awake. There are too many people still walking around believing that everything is rosy because nothing's affecting their little world. But until their little world is shattered, to change or to make them look for reasons why the things aren't right, then nothing's going to change. So it has to come to the collapse. It has to, because there aren't enough people that are ready to wake up yet, because they're so clued. They're so, yeah, that's it. They're so in love with money. They're so in love with the system, and a lot of the activists that we actually meet ourselves, that they were wanting to change this little thing, or they want to change that little thing, but they're not understanding the bigger picture. And it gets quite frustrating in a way. But like I say, I'm on the side that says, well, it's got to collapse because there's just too many zombies out there to put a name on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has to, because as you pointed out earlier, you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet.
Yeah.
And you certainly can't have infinite growth on a finite planet with no adverse consequences. Yeah. And so we're in a far worse situation than we were in 2008, when the system came within a blink of an eye of all coming down. This, according to Ben Bernanke, a year and a half after the fact. He admitted that industrial civilization nearly collapsed when Lehman Brothers fell. And
we had the same reports come out over here that Gordon Brown, who was our Prime Minister at the time, was minutes away from calling the army out on the streets.
That's right, yeah.
So
right, well, you look at the derivatives market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You look at the great disaster, and it's really a financial disaster the big banks are immersed within right now.
Oh yeah.
You look at the bond markets. I mean, things could break any time.
And it's global. The reports that have just been seen just today, we're seeing growth figures all the way around the world just down. All growth is down. All growth is slowing down. We're coming back to that.
Right.
Mike taught us about it. He called it the bumpy plateau, where it was up and down, and when you look at the stock markets you can see that. But he did say that it'll come to a point where it will no longer grow to where it used to grow to be. It will never get back up there again.
And each
trough will be lower down. Yeah, and each trough would be lower and each peak would be smaller.
And shorter.
And we're definitely seeing that in the economies around the world. At the moment it's kind of hidden because we have all this cheap oil, and then that's it's kind of shot themselves in the foot, really, isn't it? I mean, they took so long to do anything about the fact that we were going to experience peak oil, that when they actually did something about it, and they've started to manage to be able to mass produce oil from Canadian tar sands and fracking and whatever they're doing, they've actually had an adverse effect now on the market, where they've flooded the market with oil. You've got all these global oil producers now that all need the money that the oil brings to keep their economies afloat. So no one's wanting to drop the price. Nobody's wanting to drop production. And it's quite fascinating to sit on the sidelines and watch it all and going, wow, look at that. Aren't they stupid? How crazy are they? All for money. The resource is there. The resource will always be there. But it's all because of this paper thing, this money.
We do have to stop our dependency on oil, though.
It's all about the money. Yeah, and these price fluctuations we're seeing are just what was anticipated, just what was predicted in advance by people who were studying peak oil. Mm-hmm. It gets expensive, and that destroys demand.
Yep.
And I read recently that a 1 million barrel per day demand destruction of 1 million barrels per day. So only a decline in demand of 1 million barrels per day caused the price to drop to $80 a barrel.
Wow.
So, it doesn't take much, since nobody has a job and nobody's building anything anymore, nobody's making anything. Well, it doesn't take much to get down below $80, and then what's next? $60, and then what's next? And on it goes.
Well, we hit 40 today. 40,
48,
48, 40. That was the
WTI. price,
that's
wasn't
right.
it?
Yeah.
It wasn't Brent crude.
Right.
Brent crude was hovering 51, but it's still half of what it was last year.
That's
6
right.
months ago.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, it's starting to look a lot like Arctic sea ice.
It is, yeah. But the difference being that the cheap oil, it scares me in one way that more people are now going to be filling up their cars and driving everywhere. That scares me. That worries me on the climate front.
Well, of course. I mean, it's a disaster regardless. Had the price stayed high, had remained, had sort of gradually gone to $200 a barrel, as Matt Simmons was predicting before he died. Had it gradually gone there and stayed there, then societal changes would have been imminent. There would have been no way out. Society would have had to change, but that's not what happened, is it? So here we are,
isn't it? Yeah.
So instead, here we are with the horrors, really, of the price swings. And they go up and they go down, and when they go down, everybody thinks we're saved. And when they go up, everybody thinks it's a disaster, and around it goes.
Yep.
Either way, people lose their jobs.
Right.
And the rich get richer. So you were saying that you had an email with 14 questions on there. Are you going to give us an insight into what they were?
Hang on a minute.
Hold on, what?
I think we should explain to the listeners what we're talking about first, though.
With what?
With the email. What's the email about?
Oh, it's about the European tour.
Yeah, that's right.
So the forthcoming European tour produced a series of 14 questions. I think from somebody who wants to support my efforts, but he isn't really clear on what the efforts are going to be. So he asked these 14 questions, and you can stop me at any time or edit any of these out because some of them probably aren't very interesting. So question number 1, and for me, I have so little understanding of all things technological that all 14 of these questions are numbered 1 in my Gmail response to him. So I don't know how that happened. So question number 1 followed by 13 more question number 1s. What exactly is the tour intended to do, and what would success look like? And my response is, the tour is intended to inform people about abrupt climate change and how they might act in response to abrupt climate change. Success is individual awareness, one person at a time. Mm-hmm. And next question, how does that translate to numerical terms? My answer, it probably doesn't. As Einstein pointed out, not all that counts is counted, and not all that is counted counts.
That's right.
Who is the intended audience, and what do you want them to do as a result? The intended audience is the human population on Earth. I want the audience to be informed, hence liberated. I want each person to pursue a life of excellence. I want each person to remember that birth is lethal. At this point, I'm getting a little snarky with my responses, and I suspect I've already lost all support I might have had from this person. Why would those people be willing to listen? No offense intended, but Guy McPherson is not exactly a household name in England. And I say, I have no idea who will listen or why. I can deliver a message, but receipt is never guaranteed. This is the most important message in the history of our species. Most people will continue to ignore it. Okay. Next question. I think this is the 5th question, number 1. What exactly is to be delivered? Content, agenda, time of day, etc. Say, I deliver public presentations about many topics. This tour will focus on abrupt climate change. I can deliver information about that topic and the human response in 10 minutes or 10 days. I've spoken in classrooms, libraries, congregations, and many other venues. They're all fine with me. He says, what type of venue for how many? I say, any type of venue for as many as you pack in. I've recently spoken to standing room only audiences in venues with more than 200 chairs. Marketing is key, and I can't do that for you. Is there any existing publicity material, an e-flyer or framework versions that can be refined and amended for local use? And I say, yes, I've sent this material already. I assume somebody will jump in at this point. Interestingly, nobody else on the email message has jumped in so far. Maybe everybody realized I'm a snarky jerk and the conversation has ended.
People take life so seriously, don't they?
Right. How has this kind of event been best arranged in other countries? With abundant marketing and a small group of dedicated people, nobody can do this alone, and many hands make slightly lighter work. A recent tour enlisted the help of about a dozen people, including a filmmaker, local politicians, and several well-connected community members. What is the experience with press engagement? On a typical tour, I'm interviewed for print and broadcast journalism every couple of days. Again, your contacts are key. I don't know the press there. What money is available to underpin the program? For example, if venues have to be paid for in advance, what has to be done by whom so far to prepare the way? I can't answer that question from here. I don't know what works there or how. Who is looking after logistics and what have they done and what are they doing? So then I just copied a couple of names of people who have been engaged so far. And then the bottom line, I think this is everybody's bottom line, and we've talked about how this is the very concept that drove us to the abyss. Is there anything in it for me and mine? Publicity, partnership recognition, direct participation. You must have a reasonable working model which covers these kinds of interests and concerns. And I say I practice a gift economy. I give away my time for travel expenses. Won't you join me?
Who can argue with that? Who can argue with that? There you go.
I don't think you came across snarky or like a jerk.
No.
I thought that was as good as you could give based on the questions you were given. But yes.
So it was somebody basically trying to make money off it, wasn't it?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
The agenda for the tour, should it go ahead, is that we're looking at Scotland for 5 days, Netherlands and Germany for 4 days, Austria and Switzerland 4 days, and then England and Iceland for 7 days. So looking at the map, it looks like a lot of travelling and a lot of venues to cover. Are the venues already kind of in place, or are they kind of still being arranged and agreed?
Well, apparently some of them are already good to go. I haven't really been paying a lot of attention, as is my custom when it comes to speaking tours, because I just assume things are going to fall into place, and so far they have every time. And sometimes that means that a venue doesn't go through as planned, and that's okay, because I'm always very busy, and I don't even notice if it's only 14 events in a week instead of 17.
Yeah.
So some of those have already been firmed up apparently, and others are in the works. But we have a little time. We're 3 months out before before I even show up.
Yeah.
So I think it'll all come together nicely based on my past experience anyway.
Okay.
What about the venue pricing? Are you going to ask for people to make donations on the door, or are they going to buy a ticket?
I don't have any idea.
Okay.
And I suspect that depends on a couple of things, most notably the local custom.
Yeah.
When I was in New Zealand recently, the standard practice was to ask for a gold coin, and the 2 gold coins there are $1 and $2 coins. And so they just ask people for a gold coin contribution. And other places, they've just put out a bowl and asked for a donation.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Okay.
Did you want to add anything, Guy?
No, I mean, I look forward to interacting with you when I get to the UK, and I look forward to the tour there. It's always good to chat with you, of course, and I look forward to it and appreciate it every time.
And we love you too.
And keep fighting.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to. That's what I was trying to say. But we Americans are, we hold back.
It takes the happy hippie. Well, Guy, thank you so much for your time. It's always an honour and a privilege to talk to you. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in April.
We'll speak soon.
Thank you, both of you, and I'll see you in 3 months.